Hi there, my name is Kelley Cody Grimm.
And I'm Max Grimm.
And we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life. Hey everybody, it's Kelley.
And Max.
And we are back for another podcast. And actually today I'm going to let Max take the helm on this one.
So, okay, I have got two things that really fascinate me. One of them is creativity and how people are creative. What are the different methods? What are the different tools? What are the different ways that people find their own personal creativity? And human potential, which is a subject for another time. I want to talk today specifically about creativity techniques and how they apply in acting, but they apply in life in general. And this is a lot of information that I at one point was putting together to teach an actual class in this that did not wind up materializing. However, it's stuff that I just find really fascinating. And I think not only for our acting people out there, but really for anybody. Just to do a little bit of uncovering and discussing about the different ways that we as human beings can be creative. Because I've heard enough people say, well, I can never be in the arts because I'm not creative. I don't have any creativity. Yeah, you do. People just don't know how to access it. There's a couple of things. There's a couple of main things when it comes to people being creative, either actors or whomever they are. If they can be corporate team leaders. They can be project managers. They can be certainly actors, musicians, poets, painters, anyone, but just creativity for problem solving in general. The two things are basically randomness. If you want a big 50-cent word here, it's called aleatory techniques. Mm-hmm. And the other is improvisation, which is something you may have heard of.
I think I may have dabbled in that once or twice.
Basically, these two things they cover a lot of territory. The reason that we employ these two techniques is that because they generate new ideas, they take ideas and processes that we may have been doing for quite some time, but they sort of restructure them or they reframe them by doing these different things, by taking these different approaches to things that we would not think to do. And one of the reasons for that, just in problem solving in general, is you cannot solve a problem with the same mentality that created the problem in the first place.
Oh, very good. I like that.
So this is the way of taking your situation and just, turning it on its head, turning it, upside down, just restructuring, reframing it to find ways to make your life, your situations better. They can be problem solving, they can be artistic expressions, or quite frankly, they can serve as therapy. Just looking at whatever your situation is in life and then just looking at it in different ways. You have this, and I know you've said it at a job is to be done, and it's never done quite well, or there's always a lot of problems that come with it. And you'll say, well, maybe we should try it this way. No, this is the way we've always done it. Kind of
the Eeyore mentality.
Exactly. It's like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. And basically just doing things the same way, they never get better if that is the approach you have. So one thing you can do is in the aleatory techniques, it's randomness. And there's no particular logic to it, or at least not at first. These things can be done in ways like flipping a coin, picking something out of a hat, selecting random words from a dictionary. It can be any of those approaches. One interesting thing to do is, let's say you have a problem or you have a situation and you go to a dictionary and you just sort of blindly turn to a page and point to a word. And then you can do this either with yourself or even better if you do it with a group or a partner. How does that random word pertain to whatever the situation is that you're trying to solve? And it's kind of like if you remember the thing, the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. And that's basically it's kind of a funny way to do this, but
if you know Kevin Bacon, he was actually first, I think, gained notoriety in the movie Footloose.
Yeah, he was an actor, especially when he was, younger. He was doing these, the angry young man type of things. And back in the 80s, I mean, he was really, really famous. He's a terrific actor, but he got in these specific kinds of movies, really geared towards 80s teenagers. But anyway, pardon me while I digress. The idea of it was, you draw cards or you yourself go, how many people are you away from knowing Kevin Bacon? And the theory was everyone is no more than 6 people away from actually having some sort of communication, some sort of relationship, some sort of interaction with Kevin Bacon. And the same thing really applies to a lot of these techniques. But this in particular is like, you get these random words and it can be pulled from a book. You can throw dice. You can, pick words out of a hat. You can do whatever. But how does this totally random thing, how does it pertain to whatever your question is? And there's many ways that this has been done over the course of time. There's, you can use words, or what's even better is to use images, to use some sort of picture, and picture transcends language. And by using images, you can communicate what your potential solution is to someone, even if you don't speak the same language. Even if the person is deaf, you can still communicate the same possible solution. You can start the same thought process, the problem solving process, the creativity process, by using images. Now, there was a thing, and I really love when it comes to creativity, when it comes to art, referring to the shaman of all the different cultures. And there was a thing that was done by the Hawaiian shaman. Actually, it was called cloud reading. And let's say you have a problem, or you have a question, or you have something that you're just trying to work through. And what they would do, and I've done this myself, and you can yield some very interesting results with it, is that you get clear in your mind what it is that you're trying to solve, or what it is you're trying to answer, or what it is you're trying to improve upon, or expound upon, or enlarge, or anything like that. And then you get into a place where you're not going to be disturbed, and you have a clear, unobstructed view of the sky, and close your eyes. And then just meditate or ruminate, or whatever you want to call it, upon whatever the subject is that you're trying to work on. And then after a while, you just randomly open your eyes. And whatever clouds you see in the sky, the idea is that is to create a picture of whatever the answer is, or if not the answer, just the next step in getting towards the answer. And I've done this one myself, and it sounds weird, and it sounds all kind of woo-woo. It really works. It takes you out of your logical thinking mind, and it sort of takes art and science, or it takes intuition and science, and puts them together. And I always think it's the coolest thing when you have things that are basically a leap of faith or an intuition, and it puts it together with science. Because the two are not mutually exclusive, but so many people, so many creative people especially, tend to throw out scientific thinking and the scientific method, and kind of, you do something, you see what you see, and then you go from there. And you have to have that, certainly, but at the same time, the two things of science and fact, and putting things in sort of like a mathematical order, there's room for the two. There's room for improvisation within structure. I always like to think of it as science and mathematics are sort of like a floor plan of a house. And it's very structured, and the rooms are a specific size and a certain height, and they're a certain dimension. But within the rooms themselves, that's where you can have all of this creativity. You can have these fanciful things that live within structure. And probably, I think the best example of this, and I've used this one in classes any amount of times, but I remember getting into a discussion with somebody one time about, I'm a big classical music nerd, and we got into a discussion about Beethoven and why was Beethoven such a genius. And what the guy said to me, and I found this very interesting, is because he found a very good balance. He found a very good equilibrium between form and passion. And if you look at a lot of Beethoven's music, there's a really definite structure to it. But then within that structure, there are these very beautiful, fanciful things that happen. And the science and math and the artistry and the poetry, they collaborate with one another. They fit into one another. They give room for one another to be better, rather than one confounding the other, or one, upstaging the other. And that is something that if you just sort of step back and let it happen, the results that are yielded sometimes are so cool. It's the sort of thing where I was like, I never would have thought of that. Mm-hmm. I think we're losing in this society. I think people are getting very, very black and white. Especially when it comes to things in modern day, like politics and things like that. It's like, it's my way or the highway. And
the other side is evil if they don't believe 100% what I believe. And it's like, there's all these areas of gray. Don't limit yourself by just saying it has to be this way. When we talk about acting styles, there's so many different ways that you can work with that. But, I think just within what you're saying about science and creativity, you can definitely, I think creative minds are what creates the science around it, because if you weren't able to envision something in a big way, you wouldn't be a very good scientist.
Exactly. I've heard it said, like, science is a body of facts that is constant. If it's being done right, this body of facts is constantly expanding and being refined. And science does not have all the answers, but they keep looking for it. And the way that scientists can expand that body of facts, expand that body of knowledge, is using these creative things.
Ways to run tests and things, and not ruling out that they know they're going to be wrong over the course of trying to prove this theory. That's just built in there. So getting really enmeshed and saying this is the only way to do it, you're not going to have the breakthroughs you think you will.
I mean, and there's things like mind mapping, which we can talk about at another time. But there's some ways that, you can bring about your creativity if you feel that you're just not a creative person, or you have difficulty. Take a walk. Take a walk. Put on your shoes, go take a walk, and particularly maybe walk around in a part of town that you don't usually walk around in. Another thing, and I remember when I was a kid, this was considered to be just a horrible, horrible thing, daydreaming. Just looking out the window and daydreaming. I remember, particularly by my second grade teacher, just being chastised for looking out the window and daydreaming. That's where you can get some of your best ideas. Just kind of like let your mind go and then just look out the window or whatever and just see where your brain goes. There's one particular kind of meditation, and it takes some time to get there, but to where you are able to actually sort of step back from your own thought process and just observe your thoughts and just kind of let them come, let them be what they are, and then let them go without reacting to them, without being affected by them. And then after you do this for a while, you start to see within your own thought process of, why did I think this, or why did I do that, or why did I respond to something in the way that I did? And when you're able to step back in that way, you start to see your own process. You start to see why you do things the way you do. Another thing is sleep and dreaming. And I want to share this one. This was actually, I heard about this. Supposedly it was done by Salvadore Dali and also by Carl Jung. And basically this, and you may want to try this. And this is something I would say, if you want to try this, do it more than once. But basically you get pad of paper, notebook, whatever, and something to write with. Stick it next to your bed or the sofa or wherever you like to take it out. And then basically you get something that you can comfortably hold in your hand that weighs, I don't know, maybe a pound or so. Nothing heavy, but just something to where it's like you physically know you're holding something in your hand. And then lay down and go to take a nap. And then just as you start to drift off, what's going to happen is this thing that you're holding in your hand, you're going to drop it. And that's going to you'll be sort of in the process of from like wakefulness to sleep. You're sort of in this state called hypnosis. It's the state between sleep and waking. When you have this thing in your hand and you drift off and you drop it, it's going to rouse you from this state. And whatever your first thought is, whatever, I don't care how weird and goofy or dumb or exaggerate or ridiculous or whatever, write it down immediately. Immediately. Do not process it. Mm-hmm. Write it down immediately. Or draw a picture if you need to, but whatever, but the trick of it is to immediately write it down without processing it and just kind of let it be what it is. And the reason for this is that it is said intuition is the first thought that comes to your mind when you are presented with a problem or a situation. Mm-hmm. Intellect is the second thought that comes into your mind that goes, oh, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. What? No, that's not going to work. You have to be able to differentiate between intuition and intellect. You need both, truthfully. You need both, but that is an exercise to just do on a regular basis. This is how Salvadore Dali came up with so much of his imagery, how much Carl Jung came up with, so many of the theories, and Carl Jung is a whole other subject that we really don't have time for here. And there's so many people who can speak with greater eloquence about Carl Jung than I can. But if you've ever read into any of this stuff, if you've ever looked at any of Dali's work, it's kind of like, where does this stuff come from? Mm-hmm. It's within the state of hypnosis between sleep and dreaming. There is a thing also, it was picked up by the surrealist painters. And it's a painting technique. It's called decalcomania. And basically what that is, it's the transference of ink or paint or something like that from one surface to another. The way that this was done is that you take something like a piece of glass. Mm-hmm. It can be a piece of tin foil. It can be a piece of cardboard. It can be whatever. But basically, you take some paint. Acrylic or oil is usually the best thing. I would say acrylic. Mm-hmm. But you basically just smear some of that in just random patterns, drips and dabs and squiggles and whatever. Put that on your piece of glass, and then you take a piece of paper, or if you really want to get fancy, you take a canvas or something like that, and then you take the paper, take the canvas, and smush it down onto the random paint, and then sort of like smush the paint around with your hand. Okay, and then peel the two apart.
Interesting.
Now, what happens there is you'll create some kind of a swirly, smudgy, Jackson Pollock-esque type of abstract piece. And then once that dries, you take either thin paintbrushes or markers or pencils or Sharpies or chalk or, ink or whatever. And then that's when you start to fill in the finer details. And what happens is that as you start doing that, it's like, oh, there's a face right there. Oh, there's a bird over there. Mm-hmm. And sort of this image just evolves from these random patterns of paint or ink. And it's basically another one of those things that helps you to take a situation out of its context and put it into totally another, and find these new ways of thinking outside the box. Of just new ways of thinking, of just reframing, that shifting your paradigm is another term.
Yeah.
Right there. And another thing I personally have done, it's called bibliomancy. Mm. And you can do this. A lot of people tend to use religious texts, the Bible, the Torah, the Upanishads, whatever. But really, this can be any book that has special meaning to you. For me personally, I would pick up a book of poetry, but particularly I think about the novel Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach, which came out in the late 60s. It's probably one of the books of my life that I have ever read that has just had really changed me at the time. To this day, I still look back on that book and go, wow. Again, it's kind of like the cloud reading, in that you have a situation, you have a question, you have a problem, you have an equation that you're trying to solve. You blindly sort of just flip through the pages, close your eyes, and then when you open your eyes in like a paragraph or a couple of sentences, it will relate to whatever it is that you're pondering, whatever that may be. And I've done this particularly when I was younger, when I was going through a lot in my early 20s and just a lot of the problems and things like that I was having. It genuinely helped me in so many ways to figure things out. And it was just sort of this, I never would have thought of that. There's so many different, and this is a subject I really truly love. And I know I'm not going to cover everything within the scope of this one podcast, but there are so many things you can do. There are so many ways that you can increase your imagination, that you can, increase your perception. One of the, if you've ever gotten into anything like transcendental meditation, and I know I've mentioned this before, but basically the idea of it is that your head is like a box with an open top. And there's great ideas falling out of the sky all the time. And sometimes those great ideas happen to fall into the opening in the top of your box head. The thing about doing techniques like this is that it makes the box bigger so that you can catch these ideas, so that these ideas can fall more easily to within your consciousness, within your sphere of perception. And it's the sort of thing I wish more people would do, these sorts of things, because we have so much potential as humans. And everything that man has ever created started with an idea. Your idea processing faculties are small and limited. There's no way you can manifest your full potential as a human being. Everything starts with an idea. The better you are at thinking, the better you are, the more open you are to all these crazy ideas, the more you will eventually make manifest.
Yeah. What I would say in improv, we have a game called Clips and Phrases. So if you've ever come to any of our shows, what you will do is, we'll get a situation from the audience, we'll get a relationship. Before the show starts, we'll have passed out pens and index cards and ask people to put in, it can be a movie quote. It can be just a sentence that they've thought about, or it can be maybe an inside joke like, oh, looks like Jack broke this photocopier again. It can be anything like that. And what's interesting is you will just start the scene and you are just randomly picking out different sentences and you have to justify that within the scene. So if you're picking it out and you're opening it up and it's like, looks like we need a bigger boat, you in the scene have got to justify having a bigger boat. Are you actually on the sea? Is that your location? Or are you going to talk about we need a bigger boat to bring more people on to what we're doing? It's one of those things that you have audience members that are really afraid to shout anything out and, put up their hands or whatever. But the beauty of clips and phrases is it's something that most people feel comfortable contributing to. And when you get that shy person who doesn't really raise their hand and say anything, and you pull out their phrase and their sentence, and then you are incorporating that into the scene, there's like this incredible validation. And I don't know how many times I've had people come up to me after shows going, oh, the one about the bigger boat, that was mine. And you guys incorporated it. when we used to also do our shows online, and this was before COVID, way before COVID. This was kind of like when iCarly was a really big show, and if you have kids or whatever. So it was when you first started streaming, and we were on this streaming service, and we were basically doing an improv show. We did like tweets and phrases, or we'd ask for suggestions from the chat room, and people that were watching would give us suggestions on the chat room. So really kind of a precursor to Zoom Prov by probably about, easily 10 years or more. And what was interesting was I do remember after one show, we, would still talk to people that were in the chat rooms. And one of the persons said, you know what, you guys used my suggestions. And I feel like nobody ever listens to what I have to say, but you guys listened and then you created something out of that. And it meant a lot. And I'm like reading this and almost starting to cry, but it was just like, yeah, that's what we wanted to do. That's what we wanted to create for our audiences. So, even people that doubt their own creativity, when they just handed that idea or that phrase or whatever to us, we made a scene out of it. And for them, it was like, I'm part of this creative process rather than I'm on the sidelines. I helped them create that. And to me, that's just one of the really satisfying things about improv is when you are getting that information from the audience and you're using it and there's that respect between the two. You don't always get that. Sometimes, if you're asking, can I have an occupation? Gynecologist, proctologist. Like you've never heard that before. But when you do get people that are earnest and are really want to be part of that collaborative process, and that's not their normal thing. That they may be, like you said, science and numbers. But when you give them that opportunity to create and give you something, it's like, oh, wow. So, and to your point about the bibliomancy is, sometimes take some ideas, write them down in a hat, and then go, you know what, let me work on this today, pull it out, and then go, oh, I'm going to try to incorporate this into my day-to-day. We shut ourselves down, I think, so often because we judge. And we're always afraid we're never going to be good enough. I'm actually listening to Bryan Cranston's books, My Life in Parts. And he was talking about, now he enjoys directing in addition to being an incredible actor. But he said, there's got to be some confidence. And when he sits down with an actor and has them read, and he even said a little bit of arrogance, if they're just coming in very deflated and like, I just don't really know what I'm doing, the chances of them getting cast aren't that high. But if they're coming in, they're accepting offers and they're very open to the process. And he said, let's face it. So those of you who are actors who are listening, it's a lot of luck as far as like writing and acting. It can be skill, but it's being at the right time, right place, right time. But if you get that opportunity, go in and present yourself with confidence, because a lot of times when we're teaching slate classes, people will sit there and go, well, I don't have that much acting experience. It's like, I don't know that. You don't have to tell me that. Just go and tell me about yourself. Don't assume that you don't have that ability.
Actually, you're making me, just as you're speaking, I'm reminded of a group of kids we taught one time, and one particular young lady, I think she was maybe 8 years old, possibly, and came into class. It was a week-long theater camp. And she just is this sweet little, it's just this mousy little urchin, little angelic person. I remember we started doing one of the beginning exercises, and you looked at her and said, sweetie, would you like to try this? And she just looks up with this little face and goes, no. And I was like, oh God, you. And whatever it is you did, whatever it is we did, whatever happened, whatever steps we had, that started out on that Monday morning with just this, she just wanted to fold herself up into a little teeny tiny package, go hide in a corner and cry.
And not be part of it.
And just want no part of this. By the Friday, I still remember, and I have the pictures, this young lady is leaping across the stage, attempting to do ballet in the most charming way possible, leaping across the stage with this giant smile on her face. And I have this one picture of her, I think from that last day. I think we were doing some kind of like improvisational monologues. And there she is, and she's got her arms just, spread out with this beaming expression on her face. And I went, wow. Remember remember back on Monday what she was like?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that nurturing is so important to all of us. I don't care if you're a little kid. I don't care. We all need to have our creativity nurtured. And I sincerely hope, if you never have either one of us as instructors, I sincerely hope you find some teachers who will foster that in you, who will nurture and help to bring that out in everyone. That's my wish and my prayer.
And then there was another young lady there who, when it came time to do the exercise, and little kids get into this, and adults are a little bit more, again, judgy, because it's like, okay, pretend you're a rain cloud and do the different physicalities. Mm-hmm. And so we're talking a little bit more about that. And this one little girl, and we're doing, the rain, and then, and then now you're a lake and you're a body of water. And it was just so sweet. This young lady comes up and explains to us in absolute and scientific terms, which frankly, I was having a hard time following, about what precipitation is and condensation in the clouds. And I'm just looking at her going.
She was about 5 or 6 years old. Mm-hmm. And just this, and she came in with, just groomed and coiffed, and her hair was just so, and she's in her pretty little dress and all of this. And it's one of the coolest things, I think, especially when I've had the opportunity to get up and teach kids, especially little ones, because it's like you learn so much from them. There's no filter. There's no self-censorship. There's none of that stuff.
They might feel shy, but they don't judge themselves, I think, as hard as...
Yeah, no, they just...
when they're that age. Yeah.
And as I have said many times over, the story about Pablo Picasso, his quote is, "It took me 4 years to learn to paint like Raphael, but it's taking me the rest of my life to remember how to paint like a child." Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing. We're just losing that. In the ability to be creative, it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah. You're not plowing down trees. You're not hurting the environment. You actually are helping the environment, just because I honestly believe that creative energy can go and flow out, and it helps other people. And, ultimately that's what I think you will find is when you stop blocking your own offers and you do the yes ands, what you are going to do is all of a sudden these ideas, and you are going to zoom because you've been blocking that. You've put this barrier up over your head or your imagination. But when you kind of let that crumble down and you're like, you know what, I'm going to accept ideas, and I'm going to be open to my own ideas. I'm going to be open to other people's ideas. In rapid succession, all of a sudden you will have so much stuff coming at you. It can almost be a little overwhelming because you've been blocking it for such a long time, that when you open up that faucet, those ideas are going to flow. And, just literally go with the flow. Don't block it for yourself anymore. But, when we're finished with this podcast, I want to sit down, have a nice cup of coffee, and do some writing, because that's how I relax. Sometimes people go, "Oh, you're so busy," and things like that. And I'm like, for me, fun is creating these worlds and writing, whether it's within a novel or it's within a script. And what are my characters going to do? In the last podcast, we talked about Commedia dell'arte characters. We were doing another table read last night of community, and then just kind of looking at the creativity and the need for characters to change from the beginning. What is their arc in the end? And sometimes you don't see that in a pilot script. But what was cool in this pilot script for Community, the character Jeff, he's still snarky as he was throughout the thing, but he did open himself up to wanting to accept other people and not have to be the guy who's there. And then when you kind of saw that there are other people in the group getting that, going, "Oh yeah, Britta is the Columbina." Yeah. And yes. And yeah. So, you started to see that, and they, they're getting it. So after we finished, Max and I went, we need to keep on, just doing that and having fun with it, whether it's our own scripts or whether it is looking at pilot scripts. from past shows and things like that, because it's a fun way to get people to open up and get to think. And it's a low pressure thing because it's usually a cold read.
And a podcast in the near future, there's a bunch of specific theories and processes that are used in different environments to bring about creativity and creative thought and paradigm shifting and all that sort of thing. That's going to be for another time. But I wanted just to finish up a couple of things, a couple of creative approaches that I've come across over the years. There was a touring animation festival that used to go around the country. This was back in probably the late 80s, early 90s. And I think it was called Spike and Mike's Animation Festival or something like that.
I remember us going.
And there was this one particular short film. It started, they had a bunch of different animators. And one was not allowed to talk to the other. But basically, it started with this one character, like this one animated character, just standing there. And they gave this image of this animated character. It was going to be the first frame of this character just plain standing there. And make 30 seconds of an animation of the character doing something. Whatever it is. It doesn't need to make sense. And then once you finish that 30 seconds of animation, you give the final frame to the next animator.
That's so cool.
And then that animator takes that one frame and then creates another 30 seconds. And then you get that next 30 seconds. And again, take that final frame of your 30 seconds and give it to the next animator.
So they're only seeing the frame. They're not seeing the 30 seconds.
No, they're not seeing anything.
Very cool.
And then it's all put together at the end of the thing. And just these different tangents and the ways that, things were put together. It's like you would never think to do that. A couple of other things to consider. Improvisation, particularly, there are basketball and jazz orchestras. Now the thing about basketball and the game of basketball has got a structure. It has got a set of rules. An orchestra has got a conductor, and these guys play the horns, and these guys play the strings, and this person's playing keyboards, and this person's on percussion, and there's definite demarcations. There's stuff like this is my job, this is your job, this is the other person's job, and there's a definite structure to all this. However, within the structure, that's where all of this unexpected improvisational, just flowing from one movement into the other without a whole lot of thought behind it. It's finding that balance, that equilibrium between form and passion. Mm-hmm. And we do this all the time. We just are not aware of it. The musician John Cage, was an avant-garde musician. One of the things he used to do, apparently, and I think because astronomy is another subject I find so fascinating. But what he would do, he would take a blank piece of musical paper, of staves, basically, and he would project on top of this blank piece of sheet music star maps and just maps of constellations and parts of the heavens, and he would project that onto the blank musical paper and then put the notes where the stars were projected on, and he would just create from there. Also, another thing he would use was the I Ching, which has gotten...
I remember reading that.
The I Ching, it's been used by people to kind of use it for divination and fortune telling, which is not really the purpose of it. But it's just, you just throw these coins or these sticks, and it comes up with these different number patterns, and the number patterns are all random, but the different combinations equate to these things called trigrams. And you get these things like, fire over mountain or water over air or things like that. And you sort of take these very abstract, broad-based concepts and you start applying them to very specific things. And it helps to just make clearer what it is that you're trying to solve, what it is you're trying to create. And there's so many ways that we can do this. And at a point in the very near future, there's a thing called the SWOT analysis. There's the Herman brain dominance instrument of right brain and left brain working together. There's the creative solving process and the Osborne-Parnes process, and there's a bunch of processes by Edward de Bono, and all. We'll get into that at another time. But there's so many different ways to think about stuff, to perceive stuff, all the different ways that you can make different types of sense of these different things, and that's really some of the stuff that I really want to share with you guys in the very near future.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you brought up the SWOT analysis, because that does come back to business, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I think that's a very interesting, just way to look at things, and then to open up the discussion and let your employees be able to give their input of what they think, because what they see in their mind's eye could be very different than what you're having as a manager. And because they're out there on the front lines, they may be able to, and if you're open to that creativity and that input, it can really change your business around. But anyway, guys, I hope again that this has been helpful.
I sincerely do.
And, just for a creative prompt for this week, open up a book, kind of just close your eyes, point to a line, and see if that triggers some creativity in your writing, your painting, your cooking, your sculpting, music. Your management technique. So any of those things, but yeah, and it can be any book. It can be fiction, nonfiction, whatever, but kind of just play with that. Do your own kind of clips and phrases, but by opening up a book and just kind of randomly going, what is it that I have to learn? And then really take that to heart. Don't block it and say, well, that doesn't make sense.
So long as the book means something to you. So
exactly.
So long as it's something that interests you for whatever reason, and start there. It's just being creative just makes life so much better. Yeah. You feel good because you can kind of push away from it and go, this is what I created, and this isn't anything that anyone can tell me not to do. I'm going to continue to create because this means something to me. It means something to my soul, and it speaks to me. So, make that time for yourself to do that. Because even if you're the only person that ever sees it, you know that this is what you have created specifically for you. Hopefully other people will see it or hear it, or, any of that good stuff. That is one of the positive things about the internet, is you can write something as a blog and post it. You can get a video of yourself cooking something and share that with people and share recipes. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, we will be back next time. And as Max always likes to say, please share this podcast with other people who you're thinking could benefit from it. We're also on Patreon, and you can always check us out on our website. Thank you guys so much. Thanks. Until next time, be well. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website, creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, make art, not war. Much love until next time.